Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Frist Center for the Visual Arts. My name is Megan Robertson, and I'm the Associate Curator of Interpretation here at the Frist Center. Thank you for joining us for our opening lecture for the exhibition Women, Art, and Social Change, the Newcomb Pottery Enterprise. Today's lecture will be presented by the exhibition's organizing curator, Sally Main. Sally is an independent curator and the former senior curator of the Newcomb Art Museum of Tulane University in New Orleans. She received her Master of Fine Arts at Tulane University in 1993 and began her long association as senior curator at the Newcomb Art Gallery in 1996. Prior to this appointment, she was curator and exhibition coordinator for what is now the Carroll Gallery at the Newcomb Art Department from 1981 through 1999. And she has over 33 years of museum and arts administration experience. An abbreviated list of exhibitions and design installations that she has generated include The Alchemy of Beauty, Objects of Art from Tiffany's Studios and the Newcomb Pottery Enterprise, Treasures of Darkness, Spanish Colonial Silver from the Middle American Research Institute at Tulane University, and From Society to Socialism, The Art of Carolyn Derue. And of course, Women, Art, and Social Change, which is ending its 9-venue run at the Frist Center, and we're so pleased to have it in our city. Please go see it if you haven't already. Sally has also worked on several regional collaborative projects and exhibitions, including 300 Years of American Art, which appeared at the Gulf Coast Explorium in Mobile, Alabama, and at the De Young Museum in San Francisco. The Dead Sea Scrolls, which also appeared at the Gulf Coast Explorium, and the Israel Antiquity Authority in Jerusalem. A Day in Pompeii, which once again appeared at the Gulf Coast Explorium, and the Archaeological Superintendents of Pompeii. Ms. Main has organized 2 permanent installations at the Capitol Park Museum in Baton Rouge, Grounds for Greatness, Louisiana and the Nation, and Experiencing Louisiana, Discovering the Soul of America. Women, Art, and Social Change, the Newcomb Pottery Enterprise, was created and organized by the Newcomb Art Museum at Tulane University and the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service. It was made possible in part through the generous support of the Henry Luce Foundation and an award from the National Endowment for the Arts, Artworks. The Frist Center for the Visual Arts gratefully acknowledges our Picasso Circle members as exhibition patrons, and we recognize the Metropolitan Nashville Arts Commission, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts for their ongoing support of the center. And just before I turn the microphone over to Sally, I'd like to plug a couple of our upcoming Newcomb-related programs. On September 24th, we'll have a collecting seminar about arts and crafts pottery here at the Frist Center, so you can check out our website to learn more. And on October 14th through October 16th, we'll have a 3-day studio workshop called Designing a Clay Surface, which is a collaboration between the Frist Center and the Clay Ladies campus. So be sure and check out this amazing opportunity to learn how to throw and decorate your own pot. So without further ado, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us, and please join me in welcoming Sally to the stage.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me today. Before I start, I want to give a great, big, huge thank you to the staff at the Frist. I have never been more warmly treated, graciously treated. You all have been extraordinarily amazing, and thank you, Trinita and Megan and Jenny and Buddy and Hans and Christina, everybody. The show looks great, and I couldn't be more proud, so thank you. So let's get started. And the people of Nashville, I forgot to thank you all too. You all have been wonderful. Oh, there I am, sorry. So, Pablo Picasso once said, "Every act of creation is first an act of destruction." If this is true, it is in this crucible that the Newcomb pottery story began. The post-bellum South was a time and place of personal tragedy and sweeping societal change. American women, whose roles had been narrowly defined since long before the Civil War, were at the beginning of a long road towards suffrage and self-determination. Within the world of art and design, a new American aesthetic was starting to evolve. In the decades to follow, the Newcomb Pottery Enterprise would emerge as a quietly radical experiment, an unprecedented opportunity for Southern women to train as artists and support themselves financially working as a collective. Guided by the principles of the British arts and crafts movement, the young women of Newcomb developed into hardworking, skilled, independent craftswomen who bore little resemblance to the stereotype of the Southern belle. The Newcomb pottery in operation from 1895 to 1940 represents an achievement not surpassed by any other group of women artists in the United States. Born as a model industry within the Newcomb Art School of the Sophie Newcomb Memorial College at Tulane University, the enterprise provided an occupation that was acceptable to the social class in which the ladies' families were identified. Newcomb College is noteworthy in the field of women's education not because of what its founders intended the college to be, but because its students, particularly its art students, gave voice to the possibility and aspirations that an education could provide. During the 45 years of the pottery's existence, it demonstrated that women had skills in the arts that could be developed to earn a living and become self-reliant. Students educated in the art program became teachers, artists, activists, and businesswomen. For the 100 or so women who supported themselves or added to their family's income, each of their stories is as varied as the items they made. Ellsworth Woodward, director of the Newcomb Art School from 1887 until his retirement in 1931, is the person often quoted on the Pottery Enterprise's aesthetic and educational influences. However, credit for the pottery's multidimensional creativity and forward-thinking curriculum must be shared with the art school's female faculty and the exceptional students who gave life to the pioneering endeavor. Post-Civil War New Orleans was not a prosperous place, and education for women was particularly poor. Newcomb College was founded in October 1886 with no specific aim or goals clearly articulated, just enough money to attempt an educational arrangement previously untried in the United States, a women's college within a university. It's a side here. That $100,000 that Mrs. Newcomb gave, that just enough money, in today's money would be $2.6 million. Josephine Louise Newcomb, with Tulane President William Preston Johnston, crafted the college to serve Mrs. Newcomb's vision. One, that her daughter, Harriet Sophie Newcomb, who had died of diphtheria at 15, be memorialized. Two, that more women be trained as teachers in the New South. And two, some sort of exploration of whatever programs might bring skill and talent to late 19th century New Orleans have a home. Johnston was newly appointed to Tulane University and had read something to suggest that art needed to be central to the new women's college. On June 11, 1881, the New Orleans Daily Picayune newspaper published an article titled "Woman's Work, Which Our True Men Should Consider," that spoke to women's suitability to the workforce and noted that those who were self-supporting added to the social health and economic wealth of their community. The decorative arts were cited among the appropriate avenues for a woman to earn her livelihood. Quote, "In artistic and decorative departments of work, women in northern cities have made great progress and have received the utmost encouragement." Close quote. Johnston witnessed the 1884 World Industrial and Cotton Centennial Exposition that was held in the area of uptown New Orleans, known today as Audubon Park. Abolitionist and social activist Julia Ward Howe organized the women's department. The unit presented exhibits that included embroidery, china painting, hammered metal, wood carving, bookbinding, and pottery from educational institutions such as the Rhode Island School of Design, the Massachusetts State Normal Art School, and the School of Design in Cincinnati. From her podium at the exposition, Howe, quote, urged New Orleans women to produce handcrafted artifacts to support themselves, close quote. Whether by creative bent or financial necessity, the city's nascent women artists were eager to find means of suitable economic autonomy. The large crowd of women who attended the fair prompted Howe to employ William Woodward, professor of drawing and manual training at Tulane University of New Orleans, and his brother Ellsworth to fortify women's interest in art. The classes were so popular that ladies would arrive in advance of the scheduled time, waiting patiently to ensure that a chair was available while long lines formed outside, hoping a seat would open up. At the fair's closing, William and Ellsworth Woodward organized evening and Saturday drawing classes for Tulane and its concomitant high school in 1885. The women's drawing and decorative arts courses were scheduled on 2 weeknights and Saturdays. Classes were arranged so as not to interfere with regular work hours or domestic responsibilities. It is worth noting that the women's families were suspicious of the opportunity, and many new students to the art classes were brought by their male guardians, who went off only when satisfied that the instructor and the class seemed suitable. Once again, the classes proved so popular that a rule was instituted whereby a woman not seated at the appointed hour would forfeit the lesson and the chair to a prospective student. During Tulane's 1887-1888 academic year, nearly 100 women attended the night classes, with enrollment in the Saturday sessions achieving 800. Johnston saw the success and thought that art should be integral to the opening of Newcomb College on October 13th, 1887. One person who had not seen the success of the women's classes at the exposition was the man chosen to be Newcomb College's first and only president, Brandt von Blarcom Dixon. A St. Louis native, Dixon first turned down the offer to come to New Orleans. In his opinion, the Southern woman was, and I quote, a girl accustomed to the most solicitous care and has learned to expect every attention and courtesy from her associates and others. She lacks the discipline with which comes interest in that which requires hard work, in which might be found the corrective for her shortcomings. I'll tell you, the letter that Brandt Dixon wrote when he first turned it down is like, this place is dirty, it's got open sewers, there's blanks, wood planks, and it went on and on and on. Why they gave him a second chance, I will never know. But to his credit, within that first year that he was here in New Orleans, Dixon saw the students steadily increase their sense of purpose and responsibility while strengthening their loyalties to the college and each other. The Southern Belle archetype was being replaced with a standard that celebrated self-reliance and female capability. Building on the success of the women's classes, the Woodward brothers established the Tulane Women's Decorative Art League. Beginning in 1887, the New Orleans Art Pottery, a precursor to Newcomb's Ceramic Studio, was organized and advertised as a, quote, open cooperative association of women, mostly of Tulane's Decorative Art League, close quote. Under the leadership of William Woodward, the League employed Biloxi potter Joseph Fortune Meyer to build the art pottery's kiln and create wheel-thrown objects for decoration. He brought his friend and protege, George Ernst Orr, with him to assist with classes and help shoulder the daily responsibilities of a clay studio. The art pottery was not a financial success and reorganized in 1890 under the name the Art League Pottery Club, quote, to ensure the enthusiastic clay workers to continue their practice in the art, close quote. By 1893, the Pottery Club shut its doors, and Meyer would subsequently have a long association with the Newcomb Pottery Enterprise, being its chief ceramist from 1897 until his retirement in 1927. The organization of the Art League's Pottery Company, and ostensibly the Newcomb Pottery, was greatly influenced by William Woodward's friend and colleague, chemist John M. Ordway. He was dean of School of Manual Training, which was the forerunner to the School of Science and Engineering, which Tulane doesn't have anymore. So, giving a series of lectures on chemistry at the university, the local Daily Picayune noted, Professor Ordway spoke of the advantage which would be enjoyed by porcelain and glass manufacturers located in New Orleans, and stated that though the intense heat of the glass furnace is best endured in a cold country, the porcelain, I agree because I took glass classes, the porcelain art is one which would grow up and, fostered by artistic talent of the city, would soon grow to be one of the most important industries. New Orleans was about to find out if Ordway's predictions would prove true. Newcomb College's first home was the former Harmony Club, previously the Hale Mansion property at the corner of Camp and Delord. Just as a reference, Camp and Delord is now where the Ogden is, and the CAC, and the World War II Museum, and the Hale of the Hale Boggs, the Hale of the Hale's property is Hale Boggs' grandmother. I know that doesn't mean, Cokie Roberts. It's Cokie Roberts' great-grandmother's house, so. 59 young women enrolled in the academic classes and 91 registered in the special and art classes. Presidents Dixon and Johnston looked to industrial colleges and women's educational institutions such as Pratt and Drexel, Vassar and Smith, respectively. Among the first course offering were art classes. Newcomb's original 9 faculty included 3 drawing instructors: William Woodward, professor of oil painting and drawing from life, Ellsworth Woodward, professor of drawing from the antique, and Gertrude Roberts, later Gertrude Roberts Smith. She was professor of elementary drawing, design, and watercolor. Roberts, like her fellow faculty members, was a graduate of the Massachusetts Normal Art School. 4 years after opening its doors, Newcomb College moved further uptown to the former Rob Burnside Mansion at 1220 Washington Avenue. Incorporating an entire city block, the campus fronted Washington Avenue and was bound by Camp, 6th, and Chestnut Streets. The art classes shared a space on the second floor of the administration hall until 1895-96 academic year, when the department moved into its own building at the corner of Camp and 6th Street. Designed by noted Philadelphia architect William Meyer Jr., the Pottery Building was the next to be built, and because of its increasing success, it outgrew its space in the art building and was moved across the street, across Camp Street, to 2828 Camp. The structure was designed by New Orleans architect and Tulane alumnus Rathbone Dubuis in a style reminiscent of New Orleans' late 18th century Spanish colonial period. Just as a point of reference, I can move, right? I don't have anything behind on me. If you look at this floor plan, this is this room. So that fireplace that you see there is what's over here. Once you went up all of the Pottery Studio dirtiness, whatever, went up down here, and then upstairs was the pottery decorating room, the embroidery classes, all that kind of stuff. I also wanted to point out that lone figure is Desiree Rouman, who was an early graduate of the art program, and she stayed as the clerk of the sales room until retirement at 65 years of age. The much-loved and venerated Oh, sorry, before I go on. This is just a point of reference for everybody. So the building I just showed you is the Pottery Building up there. That was the art building on this corner. The chapel was over here. And then this was the administration building where all of the chemistry, English, what other classes were going on. And then this academy is the high school that was associated with Newcomb College to train the girls to prepare them for whatever curriculum they wanted to follow. The pieces over here, these are all the dormitories that were associated with the university, or the college rather. So if this, where's my thing? So if this is Washington Avenue, the river's over here, Commander's Palace is somewhere down there. Just to give you a point of reference. The much-loved and venerated Washington Avenue campus remained the college's home until the fall of 1918, when the facility moved to its final location on Broadway. Ruth, you know that building. Atta girl. So this is where the art building is now. The trees, I don't know if you all can see them, but you see that tree right there? Newcomb dragged acorns to plant new oaks when they moved from Washington. So all the trees that are on the horseshoe around Newcomb's sort of campus came from the Washington Avenue site. Ellsworth Woodward introduced the idea of a pottery program to President Dixon in 1893. Convinced that fine and industrial art should not be separated, Woodward chose an art pottery because it was dependent on traditional handicraft. All the pieces would be thrown by hand. The objects were to be individual expressions of the artist. The aesthetics and philosophies of the British arts and crafts movement formed the foundation on which to create Newcomb's distinctive craft, art pottery being the most recognizable. The pottery's ware was unique in the fact that no two are alike, and their decorative inspiration comes from the deep South's natural environs. The art school hired Mary Shearer first as the instructor in china decoration, then as assistant professor of pottery, and eventually assistant director of the Enterprise. A resident of Covington, Kentucky, she was a graduate of the Cincinnati School of Design and was familiar with the workings of the Rookwood pottery. Like her colleagues on the art faculty, Shearer's art training was strongly influenced by the ideals of the English arts and crafts movement. The mentor of Cincinnati's art community while Shearer was a student was British expatriate Benjamin Ben Pittman. Embracing the tenets of the aesthetic movement, he turned to nature for inspiration. In 1873, he established the wood carving studio at the Cincinnati School of Design and remained its head until 1892. He was tireless in his promotion of the decorative arts and intended his activism to open up a new profession for women. Newcomb's 1895-96 academic year included china painting and pottery ornamentation. The June 8, 1896 issue of the New Orleans Daily Picayune featured an article titled "Practical Art Education for Women," praising the opportunities the decorative arts posed to the gentler sex, and considered the field well adapted to the strength and condition of females, the implication being that women were physically limited and ill-suited for manual labor. Unfortunately, Ellsworth Woodward shared the assertion to a degree. The first professional potter hired by the college was French expatriate Jules Gabry in spring 1896. However, his tenure was short. In late fall 1897, Jules Gabry committed suicide by drowning in the Gulf of Mexico near Biloxi. Newcomb contacted Joseph Meyer and hired him to replace Gabry as the Pottery Enterprise ceramist. Like Gabry, Meyer was French-born into a family of potters. His father, Francois, was a redware potter in Alsace who emigrated to the United States in 1848 to seek his fortune. Joe, his mother, and sister arrived 10 years later, settling into their adopted home of Biloxi, Mississippi. During the course of Meyer's youth, his father opened a pottery in Biloxi and New Orleans, teaching his son and his son's friend George Orr the family business. Meyer's health should have caused him to find other employment, but he remained a ceramist for the rest of his life. His eyesight began to fail in 1904, but he continued to throw wheel forms for the enterprise. His responsibilities to the pottery's physical plant, clay and glaze mixing, firing kilns, facility maintenance, were assigned to a succession of assistants. He retired from the art school in 1927. Just as an aside, Joseph's the only man I talk about in the show, and I feel like I'm having a long-distance affair with a man that's been dead for 80-some-odd years. But Joseph is really fascinating. He was a man of his time, obviously. He was French. I blame everything on the French. And he was 50 years old when Ellsworth Woodward called him back. At 50, you're sort of thinking about retirement. He stayed another 31 years. He was 81 when he retired. At the time, mandatory retirement for faculty and staff was 65. So Joseph was truly committed to his art and truly committed to pottery, and in his own way, committed to the students of the art school. And now I forgot where I was. Ellsworth Woodward and the art school faculty set about creating an identity for the fledgling pottery that would reflect its locale and inspiration. The decision was made to make the source of designs the environment of the Gulf Coast. Meyer, already familiar with local clay deposits across Lake Pontchartrain, began experimenting with mud recipes to suit the pottery's requirements. The first samples of Newcomb pottery used an array of colored glazes in the initial production and exhibited experimentation in ceramic techniques like clay on clay, inlaid clay, modeling, and biscuit painting. The textbooks used in the art curriculum included Owen Jones' oversized 1856 edition of the Grammar of Ornament, and they also had the 7-volume smaller version from 1868. There were also included in that a number of other books by British art educators. So the library included Auguste Raisonnet's Polychromatic Ornament of 1873 and Christopher Dresser's Studies in Design. You will see when you walk through the show that there are some cross-sections. They did that for a while, and all of that came from these books, like Lilly and Midgley's Book of Studies in Plant Form and Design. However, the book that had the greatest influence on Newcomb's decorative style in the first decade of the 20th century is Arthur Wesley Dow's 1899 composition. Introduced to the idea of notan, the Japanese design concept of analyzing patterns of light and dark, or positive and negative, to harmoniously fill a space. His exploration of the principles of design and technique in non-Western cultures and their integration into selected Western concept changed the face of art education in America. Dow established a summer school in Ipswich, Massachusetts, to put into practice his design principles. Between 1900 and 1906, 9 Newcomb decorators attended the school on scholarships donated by unknown friends. The techniques taught at Ipswich would replace Newcomb's naturalistic renderings with flat forms delineated in bold and incised lines. The growth and development of the Pottery Enterprise was part of the increasing interest by the American public in the arts and crafts movement. From 1898 forward, the Newcomb Pottery joined various arts and crafts societies across the country and began exhibiting its ceramic wares nationally. Among the organizations with which Newcomb had membership was the National League of Mineral Painters, founded by local arts and crafts society delegates from all over the United States. In 1900, the League solicited Newcomb to send samples of their pottery to the Exposition Universelle de Paris under its sponsorship. The recommendation came late, and nothing special had been prepared. Decorators gathered pieces from their homes, sent requests to their friends, and contacted people who had purchased works from the school, and to bring them all together in an entirely borrowed exhibition. The college was awarded a bronze medal. During its years of operation, Newcomb was recognized with a total of 8 medals and 44 blue ribbons. Does that medal look familiar to anybody? Nobody recognizes what the seal is? Okay, it's a test at the end of this. Remember it. Okay, so as a result of the Paris Award and subsequent silver medal at the Buffalo Exposition, demand for the pottery increased and boosted the enrollment in the ceramic classes. In 1902, the college was obliged to build an edifice dedicated to the Pottery Enterprises. You all already know because I said that. I do want to tell you, it's still standing today at 2828 Camp Street, but it's an apartment building. In the pottery's early years, art students purchased the material they used in the production of their work and were compensated only when the piece sold. The reimbursement plan made the decorators' wages not only dependent on the buying public, but also events out of their control, like improperly mixed glazes, accidental breakage as pieces were loaded into the kilns, or the possibility of a ruinous fire. In 1902, the college's success allowed for a fund to establish permitting the art school to purchase from an individual decorator any finished work for the pottery sales room. The pottery's artisans no longer had to wait for their financial reward, and the burden of delayed payment now belonged to the college. I threw this in. These pieces actually were in New Orleans, but the lenders wanted them back after the show. These pieces are made by the same artist, and even though the tenet was you can't duplicate anything, the motifs are the same, but look at the completely different treatment you have on those two pieces. Same artist, same year, completely different feel. The system of payment remained in place until February 1929, when with diminished artist participation, the Tulane University Board of Administrators put the pottery's 2 stalwart decorators, Sadie Irvine and Henrietta Bailey, on a salary of $30 per month rather than a percentage basis. When you get raised to $30 a month from the percentage you're receiving, there might be a problem. 2 new crafts, embroidery and metalwork, were introduced in 1902. The art needlework class was under the direction of Professor of Drawing and Painting Gertrude Robert Smith. Adhering to the same standards and concepts of design as the pottery, the decorators used regional flora and fauna for their imagery. At the start of the endeavor, the art school offered weaving and spinning classes. It was a time-consuming exercise and likely did not develop into a Newcomb craft product for that reason. Linen and some native cottons were used as a basis for the embroidery, with the designs executed in French and Persian silk threads. The floss was colored with oriental dyes so as not to easily fade, and the stitches were kept simple: satin, outline, running, darning, and buttonhole. The effect was that of a pointillist painting, different colors juxtaposed against one another, seeming to be part of the woven fabric. The pieces approved for sale were to have the initials NTN for Newcomb Textile and Needlework sewn onto the back of the piece. The needlework was second only to the pottery in the number of sales. Oh, I think I made a mess. Anyway, these are, the one on the right, I'm talking about metalwork next, but the one on the right is the first example we have of a metal shade that was produced for the Newcomb ceramic base. And Mary Shearer and her crew were very much about making that harmony between the two. So, metalwork as a Newcomb craft product began in 1901 and 1902. The first experiments started with perforating brass sheet metal to make shades for Newcomb ceramic lamp bases. Unable to find appropriate covers for their lamps, Mary Shearer and her students decided to fabricate their own. Elizabeth Golett Rogers was the first decorator to plan and execute a shade, and the others followed. That's Elizabeth on the left. Shearer and some of her students became adept at cutting and leading glass. She also mastered the technique of weaving glass seed beads onto a metal frame and sent an example to the 1904 Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, Missouri. There's a letter on file from Ellsworth Woodward pleading with everybody in St. Louis to hold a space, hold a space. She's coming, I promise it's going to be finished. I think she had 2 days to get it up there, but she did and won an award for the piece. The college hired Mary Williams Butler, a former pottery decorator, as an assistant teacher in drawing the fall of 1901. In 1908, she spent the summer studying at the Rhode Island School of Design and Harvard University with Denman Ross, and then worked at Chicago's Callow's shop. The silversmithing that she learned there became her specialty. In 1908-09 academic year, she introduced jewelry making to Newcomb Art School curriculum. Students learned to work in copper and eventually in silver and gold. Newcomb pottery remained essentially unchanged until 1910, when the college hired Paul Ernst Cox. Joseph Meyer was a brilliant ceramist with the ability to make any shape and cook up any recipe glaze that was asked of him, but he lacked formal education in ceramic technology. In 1910, there was a mystifying appearance of black specks on the pottery that Meyer could not resolve. Woodward called on his friend and colleague, English-born studio potter Charles Fergus Binns, for help. Binns had been up at Alfred University, who instituted this college, the ceramic technology courses, and the first class that graduated was around 1905. Where did I go? Oh. He recommended the college hire Paul Cox. His impact on the pottery was immediate. Cox rebuilt technical equipment, perfected firing techniques, and developed Newcomb's characteristic satin and matte glaze that were used exclusively from 1911 through 1940. For the first time, pottery classes were designed to acquaint the pupil with processes of pottery making and to prepare her to conduct a studio pottery as well as to teach the subject. The shift in policy now allowed the motifs to be sculpted in low relief. Paul Cox left Newcomb College in 1918, traveling to Europe to work as a consultant to a French grinding wheel factory. In fall 1920, he began his teaching career at Iowa State University, becoming a full professor and serving as department head between 1926 and 1939. World War I signaled the end for the arts and crafts movement, both here and abroad. Shifting aesthetic tastes were partly to blame, but by 1916, the movement seemed to have accomplished what it originally set out to do: redefine the relationship between craft and manufacturing, establish educational and training programs in the art schools and museums, and create employment for female artisans. In fall 1913, the college introduced bookbinding into the art curriculum, developing from an early offering of leatherwork and simple portfolio binding. Lotta Lee Troy, who joined the faculty in 1909, taught the class. Arthur Dow and two well-known English bookbinders, Walter Roach and William Mason, stimulated her interest in design and craftsmanship. Using the techniques established in the Renaissance, Troy encouraged individualism in the tooled leather covers and handmade end papers. She assumed the directorship of the Newcomb Art Department in 1931 after Ellsworth Woodward retired. In 1918, the college made its last move to the uptown section of the city adjacent to Tulane University. The Broadway campus offered larger buildings and more space to grow, but in 1921-22, problems began to accumulate. In 1927, Joseph Meyer retired after 31 years of service to Newcomb College. He was replaced by Jonathan Brown Hunt, who hired Kenneth Smith as the new ceramic technician from Alfred University in 1929. Hunt's employment with the college lasted until 1934, when Smith took over the workings of the enterprise. The pottery continued to adhere to its founding aesthetics, but now the designs were softer, more romantic. Stylized motifs gave way to naturalistic renderings. Popular literature of the late 19th century painted the South as an imaginary land of sultry moonlit nights under moss-draped spreading oaks. In time, though, the moon and moss design began to wear on the decorators, and the motif appeared dated to the buying public. The number of artisans earning a living at the pottery began to fall after World War I. With a broader range of job opportunities now available to women, craft making seemed quaint. Still, the pottery continued to produce its ware with a dedicated group of students and alumni. The three pottery decorators who produced most of the pottery between 1918 and 1940 were Anna Frances Simpson, Henrietta Bailey, and Sadie Irvine. There were, of course, other decorators working at the time, but they worked for a year or two, leaving for other careers or marriage. The appearance of Newcomb's craft modernized in the mid-1920s. Corinne Chalaron's distinctive interpretation of Louisiana environs, made between 1922 and 1926, was the pottery's first hint of abstraction. Metalworkers like Juanita Marat, Carmen Favreau, Miriam Levy, and Alice Moise were executing commissions that reflected the angular tastes of the Art Deco. In the summer of 1925, Mary Scherer attended the International Exposition of Modern Industrial and Decorative Arts in Paris as a representative of the American Ceramic Society and member of an official delegation sent under the auspices of the United States government. The event gave rise to the term Art Deco. Scherer was fascinated with the modern expression she saw in the art and architecture of the expo. The decorators soon translated her impressions into new designs that were more linear than the naturalistic motifs previously favored at the pottery. One of the new designs evolved from a Spanish colonial mantelpiece Ellsworth Woodward found in the French Quarter. Known as Espagnol, Sadie Irvine described it in a local newspaper article as, and I quote, hand-carved Spanish mantle in the French Quarter. That pretty much covers it, right? So eloquent she was. It became a popular design and garnered awards at Art League exhibitions through the end of 1928. By the 1930s, Newcomb's model industry was becoming an anachronism. Many of the designers trained in the art program were finding opportunities for their talents in business, education, community service, and even self-employment. Between 1931 and 1934, the pottery lost its three founding faculty to retirement. Ellsworth Woodward and Mary Scherer stepped down from their academic duties in 1931, retiring to New Orleans and Cincinnati, respectively. Woodward remained proud of his accomplishments at the Newcomb Pottery and continued to advocate for the art and industry model. His legacy to the cultural community of New Orleans included founding two museums, the Isaac Delgado Museum of Art, which is now the New Orleans Museum of Art, and the Louisiana State Museum. He also was involved in numerous local and regional art organizations and the preservation of the Vieux Carré. Mary Scherer, the much-respected director of the Pottery Enterprise, handed the reins to former Newcomb Art student Juanita Gonzalez. The year of her retirement, she was named a Fellow of the American Ceramic Society, and her discriminating tastes were put on view at the Cincinnati Museum of Art, where she gave or loaned several art objects she had acquired over the years. Gertrude Robert Smith retired in June 1934 after 47 years of service to Newcomb College. She is possibly the least well-known of the art department faculty, but her contributions to the success of the crafts program and its model industry are immeasurable. It's ironic to know that her retirement ended the embroidery classes at Newcomb. Lotta Lee Troy became director of the Newcomb Art Department in 1931, holding the position until her retirement in 1940. With the loss of personnel and national financial upheaval, the Pottery Enterprise was under siege. Fewer female artists were opting to stay at the Pottery. Resources were scarce. Fewer female artists were opting to stay. Oh, I'm sorry, I read that already. Unlike the rest of the country, the Newcomb was feeling the economic effects of the Great Depression. The crafts inventory began to exceed its sales, and in May of 1933, the Tulane Board of Administrators directed the Pottery to hold a sale and reduce all stock by 30 to 40%. When I build my time machine, I'll let y'all know. In May 1936, Troy reported to Tulane's board that its recommendations, the inventory sale, the purchasing of fewer supplies, and the increased teaching load of the Pottery's production staff, i.e. Sadie Irvine, Henrietta Bailey, and Kenneth Smith, had so depleted the stock that Newcomb's Art Enterprise would either have to close or receive a small subvention from the university. The board advocated closing the enterprise, but decided instead to review the decision in 1 year. No mention was made of closing the Pottery again until 1939. In spite of the public's resistance to the changing Newcomb romantic Southern motifs, the decorators were determined to put a modern twist on an old theme. The realism evident in previous works was cast aside for impressions of the Gulf South's environs. Rather than literal identification of the local flora, the pottery designers started to have names such as Old Man River, featuring the eddies and swirls of the Mississippi, and Grand Isle, named for Louisiana Barrier Island that served as a resort for the state's residents. The moon and moss pattern was never abandoned and could be found in the Pottery's inventory until its close in 1940. Throughout the 1930s, jewelry makers and metal workers were filling orders from New York, Chicago, and Boston. Mary Butler envisioned her metalwork program as practical art, and the late 1920s and late 1930s were especially active years. Many of her students supplemented family incomes by making jewelry, religious objects, and table services. It is interesting to note that her classes were among the first in the art department to enroll men, primarily from the School of Architecture. One of the students that snuck in was William Spratling, so there is that connection. In May 1939, Tulane's Board of Administrators again reviewed the viability of keeping the Pottery open. Newcomb's dean, Frederick Hard, had no affinity for the Pottery Enterprise and recommended that the ceramics department emphasize instruction of undergraduate art students, not a commercial endeavor. His proposal was approved. After Lotta Troy's retirement as director of the art school in 1940, Newcomb appointed Robert Robin Durant Field as her replacement. Born in London to American parents, his area of specialization was film as a modern art form. Robin Fields is actually the first person who ever wrote a book about Walt Disney and his animation studio. In 1941, Tulane's board approved the organization of a limited commercial crafts program called the Newcomb Guild. Kenneth Smith and his assistants Francis Ford and Sadie Irvine headed the operation. Following the tenets of the Pottery Enterprise, simple, handmade, utilitarian forms were now adorned with glazes based on colors found in the Gulf South. The glazes were given such names as rainware, a blue-gray finish that suggested a building thunderstorm, and monkswear, a beautiful blue-brown that was reminiscent of robes worn by the religious communities of Catholic New Orleans. The purchasing public was so entrenched in Newcomb's hallmark blue and green decorations that the new work remained unrecognized and untouched. When the confluence of events drastically intensifies a situation, the upheaval created can be transformative, with devastation giving rise to creativity. It is in such a context that the Newcomb Pottery Enterprise was born. Judging its success is dependent on the perspective from which one views it. Newcomb's model industry didn't stimulate the region's economy nor interest other institutions to follow its lead. In the end, production dictated design instead of the artistic ideal of design dictating production. Popular demand and taste imposed a standardization of the pottery's decorative style. Pottery's division of labor was set by 19th century gender assumptions, causing friction between the male ceramist and the pottery's co-director, Mary Shearer. What synthesis the Woodwards hoped to achieve between art and industry, artisan and apprentice, or between local circumstance and national taste did not come to fruition. More appropriate is the measure of Newcomb's model industry in human terms. In spite of local postbellum circumstances, the crafts venture elevated regional pride into an aesthetic principle. Students educated in the art program elevated their cultural communities as teachers, artists, activists, and businesswomen. Some were well off, secure in their financial future. Some chose to marry and have families, passing their skills and interests on to the next generation. Most of the women came from middle-class homes with working-class families. Whatever their circumstances, they formed a cohort of women who gained the respect of local, national, and international art communities. Mary Shearer, the Newcomb Pottery's co-director, came to New Orleans to start her teaching career, but achieved so much more. She focused her abilities on developing Newcomb's decorative style and experimenting with glazes to achieve the pottery's signature palette. Her presence distinguished the model industry at a time when accepted methodology dictated male dominance. Gertrude Robert Smith, hired by Newcomb at the age of 18, contributed to the cultural life of her adopted community by helping to organize clubs like the Artists Guild and the Art Association of New Orleans. Lotta Lee Troy accepted the challenges faced by the pottery during the Great Depression and the changing societal tastes and mores of the early 1930s by insisting on products of good quality and artistic merit. That the Newcomb Pottery Enterprise left a lasting mark in American art history is due in no small part to the art school's female faculty. Those women's devotion to the highest creative standards helped shape and encourage the students whose applications of those lessons produced Newcomb's incomparable legacy. Thank you. Okay, test time. Y'all remember that? The medal, okay. Campbell's Soup sent the first soup in a can to Paris and won a gold medal. And from 1900 until just recently, that medal has been on their label forever. So, questions? Okay, questions? I know I was not that brilliant that y'all don't have questions. Yes, sir. Ma'am. Who's back there?
What is your favorite piece in the exhibition?
Okay, I have no children, so I sort of kind of can say that. I'm going to show it to you, because every time I do a talk, everybody asks that question. I'm going to show it to you, but it's not pretty. It's not outstanding, but it's the only, one of a few, I can't say the only, it's one of maybe 3 narratives that were allowed on pottery. It's a little vase. It's like 7.5 inches. I got a phone call one day at work, and it was from a local auction house, and the woman said, we have a piece of Newcomb pottery, but I don't think it's finished. I said, well, what does it look like? Well, it's not decorated all over. I said, is it glazed? She said, yeah. I said, well, then it's finished. I said, can you describe it? She goes, well, it's kind of, there's a decoration at the top, but there's nothing on the bottom. I'm like, okay, well, that didn't tell me anything. So I said, okay, I'll come after work, let me take a look at it. So when I went upstairs in storage, I looked at that thing and I thought, that's a flood. There's something wrong with it. It's a flood. And then all of a sudden, my mother grew up in Old Algiers and went to Holy Name of Mary Church, and all of a sudden, this steeple looked very familiar. And then when you look at it more, you can see sort of the dissipating clouds after storm. Well, of course, me and my nosiness, I had to find out the piece is dated 1901, so I thought, let me go look. And in the library of all of these, NOAA papers and books and histories of hurricanes. And sure enough, in 1901, in August 14th, actually, a Category 1 hurricane formed at the mouth of the river that raised the river level 7 feet in 4 hours. It wiped out Port Eads, it wiped out Buras, it wiped out pretty much everything that was close to. And at the time, there were no levee systems. It was just whatever the natural buildup of sediment had been on the river. So if you're standing in downtown, or uptown rather, New Orleans, and you're looking towards the river from school, and all of a sudden you see in the water do this, it became something momentous that Alice Raymond Scudder had to depict. And so fortunately, we were lucky enough to acquire the piece for the Newcomb Art Collection. And so I think it's the story that's my favorite. It has such a great story behind it. And like I said, there are very few narratives. I only know of one. It's a dance that used to be done in Congo Square by an African American community on Sunday afternoon. They did let them do that, but there really are very few narratives on the pottery's decorations.
If a piece of this becomes available in the market somewhere, how do you identify it as being Newcomb?
Thank you. I always forget that. Okay. On the bottom of a piece of Newcomb pottery, there are certain signifiers that will let you know it's Newcomb. The first and most obvious is there is an N within a C cipher. So it was a stamp that was made. But early on, they stamped out Newcomb College. That just took too long. So they developed this N within a C. Then you had the potter's mark. In the case of Joseph Meyer, it was a conjoined JM. Then you would see the decorator cipher, so whoever did it, like Sadie Irvine's mark was a cursive S, or she spelled out S-A-E Irvine. Harriet Jore's was a conjoined HJ. So, and then that done, then you look for the inventory numbers, because after 1901, the pottery became so popular that they were sending it out to other places across the country to be sold. So there was a arts and crafts club in Boston. They sent it to there. They sent it to Marshall Fields. They sent it to Green & Green in California. So in order to keep track of that, there's a sequence of letters and numbers. So they started with A1 and went to 100. Then it was B1 to 100. C1, and then when they got to Z100, it became AA, BB, CC, and then they just kept, and that's how actually you can date the piece, is depending on what the inventory number is, it'll let you know what the date is. Later, after 1915 or so, things became, when it had gotten that crazy to send those moon and moss everywhere across the country, there was a shape number that was also stamped in. So if you wanted, let's say the shape of number 212 is some sort of fat little bulbous thing. So if you went into an arts and crafts shop that sold Newcomb, you could tell the owner, I want a moon and moss, 8 inches high, but bulbous, and this is the shape of one. And so it just became that kind of very specific, this is what I want kind of thing, which is what I talked about when production was more important than design. You got a question? Oh, I'm right. One more question? Yes, sir.
Are any descendants of the original artists in the city?
Are they anywhere around you in Tennessee? If you know of any descendants of the Elliott family, Esther Hughes Elliott was a decorator. She was deaf since infancy, and yet with her grandmother, her maternal grandmother, who was her favorite, they taught her how to read lips, and her paternal grandfather is Stephen Elliott, who founded the University of the South. And so she was born in Swanee. When they learned about this art program, the family moved to New Orleans. After she finished what she wanted to accomplish at Newcomb, I think they went to Biloxi for a while. They went up to Asheville for a while. So if you know descendants of the Elliott family, they're still there.
I'm familiar with the way Rookwood pottery was merchandised through fine jewelry stores, and it was customary in many parts of the country that it was given as a wedding gift or token of some achievement. Did Newcomb have that same kind of mercantile association in fine jewelry stores?
They did sell their wares at a local jewelry store called Houseman's, which had previously... In New Orleans, there's a Houseman's, which originally was Griswold, who was an in-law to one of the women who was decorating. They did sell their jewelry, like Shirley Tunison worked in the advertising department at a local department store, and they also let her sell her wares at a specialty jewelry section within the store. So there were commercial outlets. Was that the question? I'm sorry.
Did it become like a status gift?
I know it was the go-to gift if you were getting married, or baptism, or first communion. Yeah, it's that they were definitely big on wedding presents. Everybody got a mailbox and a door plate. That was like the gift to give when you were getting married, because you figure you were going to go to your house and just put that there. Unfortunately, because it's become more well-known, it's getting stolen off of people's houses. So every time somebody would call and say, I think I have a Newcomb mailbox, I said, go outside, take it off the house, go buy one at Home Depot, put it back up. I said, don't leave it out there. So yes, that they loved doorbell plates and mailboxes.
Thank you so much, Sally.
Thank you.